Step away from the child." The voice cut cleanly through the airport noise, calm but firm, the kind of tone that made people turn without thinking, and Naomi Carter froze mid-movement, her hand still gently resting on the small boy's trembling shoulder as the overhead lights reflected softly off the polished terminal floor and rolling suitcases hummed past in slow waves of motion. The boy couldn't have been more than 6 years old, his small backpack hanging loosely from one shoulder, sneakers slightly untied, tears streaking down his cheeks as he clutched the sleeve of Naomi's navy cleaning uniform like it was the only stable thing in a building full of strangers, and Naomi kept her voice soft, almost instinctive, the way she had learned long ago. "Hey, it's okay, sweetheart, I'm right here," she whispered, her tone warm and steady, her posture low and non-threatening, kneeling beside him near gate C-17 where the early afternoon sun filtered through tall glass windows, casting long golden lines across the terminal. The boy sniffled, trying to speak, but his words broke apart into quiet sobs, and Naomi gently reached into the side pocket of her cleaning cart, pulling out a folded paper napkin and offering it carefully, her movement slow and deliberate so she wouldn't startle him, and around them, travelers slowed just slightly, some glancing over their shoulders, others pausing near charging stations, sensing something unusual but not yet understanding what was unfolding. Then the sound of hurried footsteps approached from behind, measured and purposeful, and Naomi turned her head just enough to see 2 uniformed airport security officers walking quickly toward them, radios clipped to their shoulders, their expressions focused but controlled, while a third officer followed close behind, scanning the crowd. The boy tightened his grip on Naomi's sleeve, his small fingers curling into the fabric as if he already sensed the shift in the air, and Naomi felt the tension ripple quietly through the space, the kind that didn't need raised voices to be felt, the kind that made conversation soften and footsteps slow, and she kept her voice gentle, steadying the boy without moving away. "It's all right, they're just here to help," she murmured softly, though her own heartbeat had begun to pick up beneath the calm surface she maintained. The nearest officer stopped a few feet away, posture professional, hands visible, and repeated calmly, "We received a report about a missing child. Can you step aside for a moment?" Naomi nodded slightly, understanding immediately, but before she could shift her weight, the boy suddenly wrapped his arms around her forearm, holding on with surprising strength, his face pressed against her sleeve as he whispered, "Don't go," his voice small but urgent, and Naomi instinctively paused, her expression softening even further, not wanting to increase his fear, while the officers exchanged brief glances, their radios crackling faintly with distant voices. The terminal lights glowed overhead, announcements echoed about boarding groups and delayed flights, yet the space around Naomi and the child felt oddly still, like a quiet circle forming in the middle of constant motion, and Naomi gently adjusted her posture so she remained at the boy's level, her hand resting lightly on his back in a reassuring gesture, careful, respectful, calm, while travelers nearby pretended not to watch but slowed their steps all the same, and the officers maintained their positions, alert but composed, as the moment stretched, quiet and fragile, the boy clinging tightly, Naomi staying still, and the air between them holding a tension that hadn't existed just minutes earlier. Naomi Carter remained kneeling beside the boy as the soft echo of boarding announcements rolled across the terminal ceiling and the smell of roasted coffee drifted from a nearby cafe, blending with the steady rhythm of rolling luggage wheels across polished tile, and she noticed the small details the way she always did during long shifts. The boy's backpack was slightly worn with a faded dinosaur patch stitched near the zipper, one shoelace dragged loosely across the floor, and his hands were cold as they clung to her sleeve, trembling in small waves that felt more like fear than simple confusion, and Naomi spoke quietly, her voice calm and grounded, the same tone she used when guiding lost travelers toward their gates. "Hey, it is all right, sweetheart, you are safe right here," she said gently, and the boy lifted his face just enough for her to see his red eyes and flushed cheeks, his breathing uneven as he tried to steady himself, and one of the security officers lowered his posture slightly, softening his expression as he crouched down to the child's level while keeping a respectful distance. "Hi there, buddy, can you tell me your name?" the officer asked calmly, but the boy did not answer, instead tightening his hold around Naomi's arm, his fingers gripping the fabric of her uniform as if the movement of strangers around him only made the world feel larger and more overwhelming, and Naomi felt the weight of the moment settle gently into her chest, a quiet familiarity that stirred something deeper, something she carried with her every shift, every hallway, every quiet act of helping strangers find their way, and she slowly reached into her pocket and pulled out a small laminated card, one she kept tucked inside her uniform, not official, not required, just something she had made herself, and she showed it to the boy, a simple drawing of a smiling sun with the words "You are safe" written in soft blue marker, her voice warm as she spoke. "See this, I carry this for kids who get scared, it means you are not alone." And the boy looked at the card, his breathing slowing slightly, his grip loosening just enough for Naomi to gently adjust her position so she was still close but not restrictive, while the officers exchanged another glance, noticing the shift in the child's body language, and behind them, travelers moved more quietly now, some pausing near the gate monitors, others pretending to scroll through their phones while keeping one eye on the scene, and Naomi glanced briefly toward the security officer nearest her, her tone respectful and steady. "I found him standing near the restrooms by gate C-15, he looked around like he was searching for someone, and when I asked if he was okay, he started crying," she explained calmly, her words measured, never defensive, just factual, and the officer nodded, tapping lightly on the radio clip to his shoulder, his voice low as he confirmed details with someone on the other end, while Naomi gently brushed a loose strand of hair away from the boy's forehead, careful and slow, the way she had learned to move when someone felt overwhelmed, and the boy finally spoke, his voice small and shaky. "I cannot find my dad," he whispered, and Naomi's expression softened further, her eyes warm with quiet reassurance. "We will find him together, okay?" "That is what everyone here is trying to do," she said, and the boy nodded faintly, still holding onto her sleeve, while sunlight shifted across the floor, inching closer to their feet, and the quiet tension in the air remained, delicate and suspended, as if the entire terminal waited for something to unfold. The security officer stepped a few feet back as his radio crackled softly and another voice responded with confirmation that a missing child report had been issued just minutes earlier from Terminal C, and the atmosphere shifted again as more footsteps approached from the far end of the concourse, steady and urgent but not rushed, and Naomi noticed a tall man moving through the crowd with quick, controlled strides, his posture tense, his eyes scanning every face as he passed travelers who instinctively stepped aside, his dark grey suit slightly wrinkled as if he had been moving quickly for several minutes, his tie loosened just enough to suggest urgency rather than disorder, and behind him walked a woman in a Navy airport operations blazer speaking quietly into her phone, while the security officers near Naomi straightened slightly, their attention drawn toward the approaching figure, and Naomi felt the boy's grip tighten again as he sensed the movement, his small fingers curling once more around her sleeve, and she gently placed her hand over his, her voice calm and reassuring. "It is okay, sweetheart, we are going to find him," she whispered, though she had already begun to sense that the man approaching might be the one the child had been searching for, and the tall man slowed as he reached the security perimeter, his breathing measured but heavier than before, his eyes landing first on the officers, then on the small figure kneeling beside Naomi, and something in his expression shifted instantly, the sharp tension softening into recognition mixed with concern. "Lucas," he said quietly, his voice controlled but carrying a depth that cut through the surrounding noise, and the boy's head lifted, his eyes widening as he looked past Naomi, his grip loosening slightly as he whispered, "Dad," his voice fragile but relieved, and Naomi slowly eased her hand away, careful not to rush the moment, allowing the boy to stand on his own as the man stepped forward, stopping a respectful distance away as if not wanting to startle him, while the nearest officer nodded toward the man, confirming quietly, "Sir, can you confirm the child's name?" And the man responded without hesitation, "Lucas Bennett, he is 6 years old, we were headed to Denver, gate C-21. His voice steady but still carrying the echo of worry, and the officer nodded, checking quickly with the radio again while Lucas took a small step forward, glancing briefly back at Naomi before moving closer to his father, and the man crouched slightly, his expression softening further as he reached out, careful and calm, and Lucas moved into his father's side, resting against him while still turning his head toward Naomi as if unsure whether to fully let go of the moment, and the man followed his son's gaze, his eyes finally settling on Naomi for the first time, taking in her uniform, the cleaning cart nearby, and the quiet composure in her posture, and though his expression remained polite, there was a flicker of guarded curiosity, the kind that often appeared when someone tried to quickly understand an unexpected situation, and he spoke respectfully but cautiously, "Were you the one who found him?" And Naomi nodded gently, her voice calm and simple. "Yes, sir, he was standing near gate C-15 looking for you," she answered, and the man exhaled slowly, relief settling into his shoulders, yet the surrounding officers remained in place, their presence still forming a quiet circle around them, while travelers continued to move past at a slower pace, the sunlight shifting across the terminal floor, and the moment hung suspended again, relief and uncertainty blending together as the airport continued to hum softly around them. Lucas remained close to his father, one small hand gripping the fabric of Richard Bennett's suit jacket while his other hand hovered uncertainly at his side, and Richard rested his palm gently on the boy's shoulder, his fingers tightening slightly as if reassuring himself that his son was truly there, while the nearby security officers maintained their calm presence, their radios occasionally murmuring low static, and Naomi slowly rose from her kneeling position, her movements measured and unhurried as she stepped back toward her cleaning cart, not wanting to intrude on the reunion yet not fully leaving until she sensed Lucas was settled, and the sunlight shifted again across the polished floor, reflecting softly against the silver frame of her cart and the small laminated card still resting in her hand, and Richard glanced down at Lucas, his voice gentle but still carrying traces of lingering concern. "Did you wander away from gate C-21? He asked quietly, and Lucas nodded, his voice small but steadier now. "I thought I saw the airplane outside and then I could not find you," he said, and Richard exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly, while one of the officers confirmed through his radio that the child had been safely located and the alert could be cleared, and the subtle shift in posture among the officers reflected the change, their stance relaxing, their attention softening, yet they remained nearby for a moment longer as part of protocol. And Richard turned back toward Naomi, his gaze thoughtful, studying her expression, the calmness in her posture, the quiet patience she had shown, and though his voice remained polite, there was still a careful distance in his tone. "Thank you for staying with him," he said, and Naomi offered a gentle nod, her voice warm but simple. "He was scared, sir. I just did what anyone would do," she replied, though the officers nearby exchanged subtle glances, knowing that not everyone would have handled the situation with the same calm presence, and Lucas shifted slightly, looking back toward Naomi again, his small voice carrying a quiet sincerity. "She stayed with me when everyone else walked by," he said, and Naomi felt the words settle softly in the air, unexpected yet gentle, and Richard followed his son's gaze once more, his expression softening further, though a faint line of uncertainty remained in his brow, as if he were still processing how quickly the moment had unfolded. And the woman in the Navy operations blazer stepped closer, confirming quietly with the officers that the situation had been resolved, while travelers nearby resumed their normal pace, conversations returning to their usual volume, the rhythm of airport life gradually reclaiming the space, and Naomi reached for the handle of her cart, her fingers wrapping around the cool metal as she prepared to continue her shift, her movements unassuming, as if the moment had simply been another quiet interruption in a long day. And Lucas watched her, his expression thoughtful, while Richard adjusted his jacket and glanced briefly toward the departure boards overhead, the bright digital screens flickering between destinations and boarding times, and though the immediate tension had eased, something in the air remained gentle and reflective, like a quiet pause before everything returned fully to motion, and Naomi began to guide her cart slowly along the terminal floor, the soft squeak of its wheels blending into the distant announcements, while Lucas turned his head to follow her, his eyes lingering a moment longer as sunlight stretched across the concourse and the calm after the moment settled quietly around them. Naomi guided her cleaning cart slowly along the terminal, the soft wheels rolling across the polished floor while distant boarding announcements echoed overhead, and the steady rhythm of travelers returning to their routines gradually filled the space again. But after only a few steps she heard small footsteps behind her, quick and uneven, and she turned slightly to see Lucas moving toward her, his father following at a measured pace just a few feet behind. And Naomi stopped instinctively, her hand resting lightly on the cart handle as Lucas approached, his expression more settled now but still thoughtful, and he looked up at her with quiet sincerity. "Thank you for staying with me," he said, his voice soft but clear, and Naomi's expression warmed gently, her eyes softening as she crouched slightly to meet his height again. "You are very welcome, Lucas. I am glad you are okay," she replied calmly, and Richard stepped closer, his posture composed, though his gaze carried a deeper reflection now, as if he had been replaying the moment in his mind. And he extended a polite nod, his tone respectful. "I appreciate what you did. It could have been very frightening for him," he said, and Naomi nodded lightly. "Children get overwhelmed in places like this. It is a lot of noise and movement," she answered simply, and Lucas glanced briefly at Naomi's cart, noticing the small laminated card resting near the handle, the one with the smiling sun, and he pointed quietly. "You carry that for kids?" he asked, and Naomi followed his gaze, picking up the card gently. "Yes, sometimes it helps them feel calmer," she explained, and Lucas nodded slowly, absorbing the thought, while Richard watched the exchange, his expression gradually softening, though a faint line of contemplation remained, and he shifted slightly, glancing toward the departure board overhead, then back at Naomi, as if weighing something unspoken, and one of the security officers nearby offered a final nod before stepping away, their presence dissolving back into the flow of the terminal, and Naomi adjusted the cart again, preparing to continue, but Lucas hesitated, his small voice returning quietly. "Do you work here every day?" he asked, and Naomi smiled gently. "Most days, yes," she answered, and Lucas seemed to consider this, his expression thoughtful, while Richard adjusted his watch and checked his phone briefly, the screen lighting his face for a moment, before he slipped it back into his pocket, and he spoke again, his tone measured but sincere. "You handled that situation with a lot of calm. Not everyone would know what to do," he said, and Naomi offered a modest shrug. "Sometimes people just need someone to stay," she replied softly, and the words lingered in the air, simple yet meaningful, and Lucas looked up at his father, then back at Naomi, as if quietly agreeing, while the hum of the terminal continued around them, coffee machines steaming, rolling suitcases gliding, announcements echoing softly overhead, and Naomi gave a final gentle smile before beginning to move her cart forward again, the wheels turning slowly, yet Lucas remained watching her for a moment longer, and Richard followed his son's gaze, his expression thoughtful, as if the quiet interaction had left a deeper impression than he expected, and the sunlight shifted across the terminal floor once more, casting long reflections that followed Naomi as she moved further down the concourse, while the calm after the moment settled quietly into the rhythm of the afternoon. Naomi continued down the concourse, her cart moving at a slow, steady pace while the afternoon light shifted across the wide glass windows and stretched long reflections across the floor, and the sound of a distant boarding call for a flight to Chicago echoed softly overhead, blending with the quiet murmur of travelers and the occasional rolling suitcase passing by, and she stopped near a row of empty seats, adjusting a small caution sign beside a recently cleaned section of tile, her movements calm and practiced, while the laminated sun card rested near the top of her cart, catching a soft glow of light, and for a brief moment she paused, her gaze drifting toward the large windows where planes moved slowly across the runway, their engines humming faintly in the distance, and the quiet space allowed her shoulders to relax slightly, the tension from the earlier moment settling into a calm stillness, and behind her, the terminal continued its gentle rhythm. Footsteps, quiet conversations, the hiss of espresso machines, and the soft rolling of luggage wheels, and Naomi wiped a small section of railing with a folded cloth, her movements unhurried, her breathing steady, as if returning to the quiet routine that grounded her during long shifts, and a few feet away, a young couple passed by speaking softly, while a child laughed somewhere near a snack kiosk, and the ordinary sounds felt almost soothing after the earlier tension, and Naomi glanced down at the floor again, guiding the cloth slowly across the polished surface, her reflection faintly visible in the shine, and she exhaled quietly, the moment settling into memory. Another quiet act in a long day, another stranger helped, another small fear eased, and she moved her cart forward again, stopping near a row of charging stations, where the soft glow of device screens lit the area in gentle blue tones, and she adjusted a chair that had been slightly out of place, aligning it carefully with the others, her attention to detail subtle but consistent, and the overhead lights brightened slightly as clouds shifted outside, sending a warmer tone across the concourse, and Naomi rested her hands lightly on the cart handle, her posture relaxed, her eye scanning the area in the quiet way she always did, looking for anything out of place, anything that might need attention. And for a brief moment she closed her eyes, just long enough to breathe in the calm, then opened them again, returning to the steady rhythm of her work, while the airport moved around her, steady and continuous, and the calm silence of the moment lingered gently in the air, like a quiet pause before the next unexpected turn in the afternoon. Naomi adjusted the cleaning cloth in her hand and guided her cart slowly past the charging stations, her footsteps quiet against the polished tile while the afternoon light softened through the tall airport windows, and she paused near gate C-19 where a few empty seats faced the runway, the hum of distant aircraft engines creating a steady background rhythm that blended with the low murmur of travelers. And she leaned slightly forward to wipe the metal armrest of a chair, her movement steady. and deliberate, when she heard the faint sound of hurried footsteps approaching again, lighter this time, uneven but familiar, and she turned gently, already sensing who it might be, and saw Lucas walking toward her once more, his small sneakers tapping softly against the floor, while Richard followed a few steps behind, his expression thoughtful and composed, and Naomi straightened slowly, her hands resting lightly on the cart handle as Lucas reached her, his face calm but purposeful, and he held something small in his hand, a folded paper napkin, slightly wrinkled, and he extended it toward her, his voice quiet but sincere. "I wanted to give this back," he said, and Naomi recognized the napkin she had handed him earlier, and she accepted it gently, her expression warm. "Thank you, Lucas," she replied softly, and Lucas hesitated for a moment, then spoke again. "My dad says we still have time before boarding," and Richard stepped closer, offering a polite nod, his voice measured yet warmer than before. "We do not board for another 20 minutes, he explained, and Naomi nodded lightly. "That is good, it gives him time to settle," she said, and Lucas looked around the quiet section of the terminal, then back at Naomi. "Do you help kids a lot?" he asked, and Naomi considered the question briefly, her gaze drifting toward the runway where a plane rolled slowly into position. "Sometimes, yes. Airports can feel very big when you are small," she answered gently, and Lucas nodded as if understanding more than expected for his age, while Richard watched the exchange closely, his posture relaxed but attentive, and he spoke quietly. "He has not flown alone in a crowded terminal before. I stepped away for a moment and when I came back, he was gone," his voice calm but carrying a trace of lingering concern. And Naomi listened respectfully, her expression empathetic. "It happens quickly in places like this," she said softly, and Lucas shifted his weight, then glanced again at the laminated Sun card resting near Naomi's cart, and he smiled faintly. "I like that card," he said, and Naomi picked it up again, showing it briefly. "It reminds people that someone is there," she explained, and Lucas nodded slowly, and Richard followed the gesture, his expression thoughtful as he observed the simplicity of it, and for a moment the three of them stood quietly while the terminal continued around them, announcements echoing softly, travelers moving past, sunlight warming the floor, and something in the calm of the moment felt different now, more settled, more connected, as if the earlier tension had transformed into something quieter, something meaningful, and Naomi rested her hand lightly on the cart again, her posture relaxed, while Lucas looked up at her one more time, his expression calm and grateful, and Richard followed his son's gaze, the reflection of the terminal lights soft in his eyes, as the quiet understanding between them settled gently into the rhythm of the afternoon. Richard remained standing beside Lucas while the gentle hum of the terminal continued around them, and after a quiet moment he reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a small leather card holder, his movements calm and deliberate, as if he had made a decision during the silence that followed their conversation, and he looked at Naomi with a softened expression, the earlier distance in his gaze replaced with something more sincere. "I would like to thank you properly," he said quietly, his voice measured but genuine, and Naomi shook her head gently, her posture modest. "There is no need, sir. I am just glad he is all right," she replied, her tone calm and warm, and Richard paused, studying her expression as if weighing her response. Then he extended a simple business card toward her, not insistently but respectfully. "If you ever need anything, please do not hesitate to reach out," he said, and Naomi hesitated briefly, then accepted the card with a polite nod, her fingers brushing lightly against the smooth edge of the paper, and Lucas leaned slightly closer, curious, while Richard continued, "Kindness like yours is rare, especially in a place where everyone is in a hurry," his words quiet but thoughtful, and Naomi offered a gentle smile. "Sometimes slowing down helps people feel less lost," she answered softly, and Lucas looked between them, his small expression thoughtful. Then he reached into his own small backpack and pulled out a folded paper, slightly crumpled, and he held it toward Naomi. "I drew this while we were waiting earlier," he said, and Naomi accepted it carefully, unfolding the paper to reveal a simple drawing of a smiling sun beside two small stick figures standing near what looked like an airplane window, and beneath the drawing were uneven letters that spelled out "Thank you," and Naomi's eyes softened as she looked at it, her expression warm and touched by the small gesture. "This is beautiful, Lucas," she said gently, and Lucas smiled faintly, seeming more relaxed now than when they first met, and Richard watched the exchange quietly, the corners of his expression softening further, and an overhead announcement echoed across the terminal, calling passengers for pre-boarding at gate C21, and Richard glanced toward the display screens, then back at Naomi, that is our flight," he said calmly, and Lucas shifted slightly, then stepped closer and gave a small wave. "Goodbye, Naomi," he said, and Naomi returned the gesture with a gentle smile. "Have a safe trip, Lucas," she replied softly, and Richard offered a final nod, his voice sincere. "Thank you again," and as they turned to walk toward their gate, Lucas looked back once more, his small hand still raised briefly, and Naomi watched them move through the crowd, their figures gradually blending into the steady flow of travelers, while she folded the drawing carefully and placed it near the laminated sun card on her cart, the sunlight catching both as she rested her hands lightly on the handle, the quiet warmth of the moment lingering gently as the afternoon continued around her. Naomi remained still for a moment after Lucas and Richard disappeared into the steady movement of travelers, her hands resting lightly on the handle of her cleaning cart while the soft glow of the afternoon sun reflected across the polished terminal floor, and she carefully unfolded the drawing once more, her eyes tracing the simple shapes of the smiling sun and the small stick figures beside the airplane window, the uneven letters written with effort and sincerity, and she placed the paper gently beside the laminated sun card, the two resting together like quiet reminders of the moment that had just passed, while overhead the boarding announcements continued in calm, measured tones, calling passengers for flights to Denver, Phoenix, and Dallas, and Naomi slowly guided her cart forward again, her movement steady and unhurried, returning to the quiet rhythm of her shift, wiping a railing near the window, adjusting a chair slightly out of place, her reflection faint in the glass as she worked, and outside the wide terminal windows, an aircraft began to push back from the gate, its slow movement across the runway accompanied by the low hum of engines building softly in the distance, and Naomi paused briefly to watch, her posture relaxed, her expression calm, as if acknowledging the quiet continuation of the day, and nearby a family walked past, their conversation light and casual, while a traveler rolled a suitcase toward the gate, the wheels creating a soft rhythmic sound across the floor, and Naomi reached for her cloth again, guiding it gently across the surface of a nearby counter, her attention to detail steady and consistent, and as she worked, she noticed the folded drawing catching the sunlight, the small paper glowing softly against the metal edge of her cart, and she adjusted it carefully so it would not slip, her fingers moving with quiet care, and the terminal lights brightened slightly as clouds shifted outside, sending warm reflections across the concourse, and Naomi resumed walking slowly, her cart rolling forward, the soft squeak of the wheels blending into the background sounds of the airport, and for a brief moment she glanced toward gate C-21 where passengers were beginning to board, the line moving calmly, and she imagined Lucas stepping forward beside his father, holding his boarding pass, his small shoulders more relaxed now, and she allowed herself a faint, quiet smile before turning back to her work, and the airport continued around her, steady and constant, announcements echoing gently, sunlight stretching across the floor, travelers moving toward new destinations, and Naomi Carter walked forward with her cart, the small drawing and laminated sun card resting side by side, while the quiet warmth of kindness lingered in the air, soft and unspoken, like the calm that follows when someone chooses to stay just a little longer.